Chapter 57. A short time after the scene of consternation produced in Baron Danglars' house by the unexpected appearance of the police and the revelation which resulted from it, the entire mansion was emptied as swiftly as though one of the guests had suddenly developed a case of Asiatic cholera or the plague. Everyone hastened to withdraw or rather flee, for it was one of those situations in which it is better not to even try to give those commonplace consolations which make the presence of one's friends so inopportune during a great catastrophe. The only people who remained there were Danglars, making his statement to the commissary in his study, Madame Danglars, trembling in her boudoir, and Eugénie, who had haughtily withdrawn to her room with her inseparable companion, Mademoiselle Louise d'Armilly. On entering her bedroom, Eugénie locked the door while Louise sank into a chair. "Oh, how horrible!" said the young music teacher. "Monsieur Andrea Cavalcanti, an escaped convict, a murderer." "It was predestined," said Eugénie with an ironic smile. "I escaped from Morcerf only to fall into the hands of Cavalcanti." "Don't confuse the two, Eugénie. All men are contemptible, and I'm happy to be able to do more than hate them. Now I can despise them." "What are we going to do now?" asked Louise. "Why, the same thing we planned to do. Leave. You still want to do that, even though your engagement is broken off now. Why should I stay? So they can try to marry me to someone else a month from now? No, Louise. What happened tonight will serve as my excuse. I wasn't looking for one, but God sent me this one, and it's welcome." "You're so strong and courageous," said the frail, blonde young girl to her dark-haired companion. "Don't you know me yet? Come, Louise, let's talk about our affairs now. Have you made arrangements for the carriage?" "Yes." "And what about our passport?" "Here it is." Eugénie, with her usual calm, unfolded the document and read, "Monsieur Léon d'Armilly, age 20, profession artist, black hair, black eyes, traveling with his sister." "Excellent. How did you get this passport?" "When I went to the Count of Monte Cristo for letters of introduction to the managers of theaters in Rome and Naples, I told him about my fear of traveling as a woman. He understood me perfectly and offered to get a man's passport for me. I received this one 2 days later. I wrote in the words 'traveling with his sister' myself." "Well, then," said Eugénie gaily, "all we have to do now is pack our trunks. We leave tonight instead of on my wedding night." "Perhaps you'd better think it over, Eugénie." "I've already thought it over. We have 45,000 francs between us, enough to live like princesses for 2 years, or comfortably for 4. But within 6 months, we'll have doubled our capital, you with your music, I with my voice." "Wait a moment," said Louise, going over the door to listen. "The door is locked," said Eugénie. "If only someone doesn't tell us to open it." "Let them tell us to open it if they want to. We won't do it, that's all." "You're a veritable Amazon, Eugénie." The two girls set about piling into a trunk all the objects they thought they would need for their trip. When they had finished, Eugénie took out a set of masculine attire, complete from coat to boots. Then, with a swiftness which indicated that this was probably not the first time she had amused herself by dressing in the garments of the opposite sex, she put on the boots, trousers, vest, and coat. "Wonderful!" exclaimed Louise, looking at her in admiration. "But will that lovely black hair fit into a man's hat like that one you have there?" "You'll see," said Eugénie, grasping her long, thick tresses in her left hand. She took a pair of scissors in her right hand. A few moments later, nearly all of her splendid hair was lying on the floor at her feet. She showed not the slightest sign of regret. On the contrary, her eyes shone more brightly and joyfully than ever beneath her black eyebrows. "Oh, all that magnificent hair!" said Louise sadly. "Isn't it 100 times better this way?" said Eugénie. "Don't I look more beautiful to you now?" "Yes, you're still beautiful. But where will we go now?" "To Belgium, if you like. That's the nearest frontier. We'll go to Brussels, Liège, Aix-la-Chapelle, and Strasbourg, and then we'll cross Switzerland and go down into Italy. Does that suit you?" "Yes, of course." "What are you looking at?" "I'm looking at you. You're really adorable like that. If people could see you now, they'd think you were kidnapping me." "And they'd be right, by God." "Why, I do believe you just swore, Eugénie." The two girls burst out laughing. Then, having blown out the candles, they cautiously opened the door. Eugénie went first, carrying her end of the trunk with one hand, while Louise struggled to hold up her end with both hands. The courtyard was empty. The clock had just struck midnight. In the street, they found a porter and gave him the trunk. Having instructed him to take it to 36 Rue de la Victorie, they walked along behind him. A quarter of an hour after they arrived at that address, a carriage was ready to take them on their journey. "Which road shall I take, young man?" asked the coachman. "The road to Fontainebleau," replied Eugénie in an almost masculine voice. "Why did you say that?" asked Louise. "It's only to throw them off the track. We'll take a different direction as soon as we reach the boulevard." "You're always right, Eugénie." A quarter of an hour later, the carriage had passed the Barrière Saint-Martin and was outside of Paris. Monsieur Danglars had lost his daughter.